20 years ago, boy, as time passed, a terrible, terrible incident happened on Long Island. TW Flight 800 crashed. Everyone on board passed away. Well, to talk about it, to talk about the 20-year anniversary, is our very own aviation expert who always does a great job on aviation, Richard Kaplan.
Hi, my name is Richard Kaplan, and you've just been cleared for takeoff. The skies are clear above us, so let's begin. 20 years ago, I was involved in the crash of TWA Flight 800. I was what's known as an independent consultant. CBS asked me to talk about the crash, and I did. 20 years later, we've learned quite a lot from it. On that fateful night, January 17th, 1996, TWA Flight 800 departed from New York's John F. Kennedy Airport bound for Paris Charles de Gaulle. The Boeing 747-100 had 230-plus passengers on board. No one could have predicted that this flight would tragically wind up in history. About 30 minutes into the flight, the aircraft spontaneously exploded into a fireball, breaking apart into two separate pieces. The forward fuselage gyrating almost 13,000 feet into the air, while the rest of the jet made a death plunge. What we've learned from this crash is that the wiring was the cause. No one could have predicted that the United States Navy knew, though, that Capson fibers were highly flammable and highly combustive. The Capson heated to a super level where it exploded, causing the central fuel tank of the aircraft to explode. 231 souls were lost in this crash. But what we've learned from it is that we need to communicate better. The industry needs to communicate within itself. The United States Navy knew that Capson was flammable but did nothing. They never publicized that 4 F-14s exploded because of this wiring fiber. This was the fuselage of TWA Flight 800 that was recovered. A lot of people believe that a missile brought the jet down. Now, having been an independent investigator, I looked into this like everybody else. As they were bringing up chunks of the fuselage, it became more and more evident that it was not a missile that brought this jet down, but rather an explosion of high intensity. It's no secret that jet fuel burns at a very high rate and is highly combustive. It is believed that the fibers in the jet fuel combusted, causing the explosion and thus systematically causing this aircraft to crash. What people thought was a missile was actually the front section of the jet gyrating into the air, as I mentioned earlier before. It's hard to fathom that 230 people could be lost so senselessly because the industry refused to admit that Capson was indeed flammable. But sure enough, it was. And the lessons that we've learned from this since are that we need to communicate better, and we need to subsequently pass laws that make communication fundamental. This way, flying is safe for all. If we are going to be safe, then we need to communicate. We need to educate, and above all else, we need to inspire the industry to get behind us and do what is necessary to make flying safe for all. No one should ever be afraid to get on an airplane. And TWA Flight 800 taught us that we need to be more aware of what's going on around us. That we need to have better laws, we need to have better awareness, and most importantly, older aircraft need to be inspected more. This particular 747 was over 20 years old before it crashed. No airline should be operating aircraft this old. If they have the means to get new aircraft, then so they should. TWA certainly did, and at the time was replacing its 747s with newer 767s. Now, TWA is just one example of how the industry failed to police itself and failed to recognize the dangers involved with a particular wire fiber. Today, All aircraft, including 747s, have been rewired with new wiring systems that are not flammable. So if we've learned anything from TWA Flight 800, we've learned that we must be more aware of what's going on around us. And we must have the guts to say something if something is wrong. Once again, you've just been cleared for takeoff. My name is Rich Kaplan. See you next Sunday.